Welcome, brave souls, to Mr. Shadow's Stories. I am your guide through the darkness, the collector of nightmares, the keeper of tales that others dare not tell. Tonight, we venture into the fluorescent-lit corridors of America's loneliest places, the truck stops that dot our highways like forgotten islands in an ocean of darkness. Here, where the night shift workers stand between exhausted travelers and the consuming void, the walls between our world and something far more sinister grow dangerously thin. So dim your lights, lock your doors, and prepare yourself. These are not mere campfire tales. These are real encounters shared by real people who still wake up screaming, remembering what they witnessed during those endless nights. Let us begin. Story 1: The Man Who Wasn't There. Our first story comes from a woman named Rachel who worked the graveyard shift at a truck stop just off Interstate 40 in Oklahoma. It was her third month on the job, and she thought she'd seen everything the night could throw at her, until October of 2019. Rachel was alone that night. Her coworker had called in sick, leaving her to manage the facility by herself from midnight until 6 in the morning. The truck stop was one of those massive complexes with a convenience store, restaurant, showers, and a small arcade area that hadn't been updated since the 90s. Around 2:30 in the morning, during that dead hour when even the truckers are sleeping in their cabs, Rachel was restocking cigarettes behind the counter. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their sickly glow across the empty aisles. That's when she heard it. The distinct sound of the entrance door chiming. She looked up, calling out her standard greeting, "Welcome, let me know if you need anything." But nobody answered. Rachel stepped out from behind the counter, peering down the aisles. The store was completely empty. She walked to the entrance, checking the doors. They were closed, and the parking lot outside was vacant, except for 3 semi-trucks parked in the far corner, their drivers fast asleep. Shrugging it off as perhaps the wind or a malfunction, Rachel returned to her work. But 15 minutes later, it happened again. The door chime rang clear as day. This time, Rachel rushed to the front immediately, but once again, there was nobody there. Then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. On the wet mat by the entrance, there had been a drizzle earlier that evening, were muddy footprints, fresh ones. They led from the door, down the center aisle, and stopped abruptly in the middle of the store. They simply ended as if whoever made them had vanished into thin air. Rachel's hands were shaking now. She grabbed her phone, ready to call 911, but something stopped her. A sound from the back of the store. The showers. Someone had turned on one of the showers. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but Rachel was responsible for the facility. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed the baseball bat they kept under the counter and slowly made her way toward the shower area. The hallway leading to the showers was dimly lit, and steam was now rolling out from under one of the doors. Shower number 3. The sound of water echoed off the tile walls. Rachel approached slowly, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Hello? The showers are for customers only. You need to check in at the desk." No response, just the sound of water hitting tile. Rachel reached for the door handle, her hand trembling. She turned it slowly and pushed the door open. The shower was running, full blast, but there was nobody inside. The strange thing was, the shower was completely dry, except for the water currently running. There were no wet footprints, no discarded clothes, no towels, and more disturbing, the door had been locked from the inside. Rachel could see the lock's position. She'd just opened a door that had been locked from the inside of an empty room. She quickly turned off the shower and backed out of the room. That's when she heard it.
A whisper right behind her ear, so close she could feel cold breath on her neck. "Thank you." Rachel spun around, swinging the bat. Nothing. She was alone in the hallway. She ran back to the main store, grabbed her things, and locked herself in the office for the rest of the night, watching the security cameras with the phone in her hand, ready to dial 911. On the monitors, she watched the empty store, but at exactly 3:30 a.m., she saw something that made her quit the next day. On camera 4, which showed the center aisle, a shadow moved across the frame. It was human-shaped, but it had no source. The fluorescent lights were on. There was nobody in the store, but clear as day, a human shadow walked down the aisle, stopped where the muddy footprints had ended, and then faded away like smoke. Rachel never worked another night shift again. And when the manager reviewed the footage the next day, that section of the recording was completely corrupted. Nothing but static during the exact time Rachel saw the shadow. Story 2: The Wrong Passenger. Our second story takes us to a truck stop in rural Montana, shared by a night attendant named Marcus. This incident happened during a brutal winter in February 2021, when a blizzard had shut down most of the interstate. The truck stop was serving as an emergency shelter, and Marcus was working overtime to help stranded travelers. Around 1 a.m, a woman stumbled in from the storm. She was wearing a thin dress, completely inappropriate for the weather, and she had no coat, no shoes, just bare feet that should have been frostbitten, but looked perfectly normal. Marcus rushed to help her, wrapping her in emergency blankets and trying to warm her up. But the woman just stared at him with empty eyes and whispered, "He's coming. He's right behind me." Marcus called 911, but the dispatcher said emergency services couldn't reach them until the storm passed. He was on his own. He sat the woman down in the restaurant area and brought her hot coffee, but she wouldn't drink it. She just stared at the entrance, her eyes wide with terror. Then, at exactly 1:30, the power went out. The backup generators kicked in after a few seconds, but in that moment of darkness, Marcus heard the woman scream. When the lights came back on, the woman was gone. Marcus searched the entire facility, every room, every closet, every bathroom stall. The woman had vanished, but what he found was worse than her disappearance. In the snow outside, visible through the window, there were 2 sets of footprints. One set was small and barefoot, clearly the woman's, but following directly behind them, never more than a foot away, was another set of massive prints. These were easily size 16 or larger, and they didn't look quite human. The stride was too long, and in some places, the prints seemed to show only 4 toes. Marcus grabbed his phone and started taking pictures, but the moment he pointed his camera at the footprints, his phone died, completely dead, even though it was at 80% battery. He tried the security cameras, but they had all malfunctioned during the power outage. No footage of the woman leaving, no footage of anyone entering, but when he checked the timestamp, the power had only been off for 3 seconds. 3 seconds wasn't enough time for the woman to disappear the way she had. As dawn approached and the storm cleared, state troopers finally arrived. Marcus told them everything, but when they went outside to look at the footprints, the snow had completely covered them. There was no evidence that the woman had ever existed. Except for one thing. On the chair that the woman had been sitting, Marcus found a driver's license. It belonged to a woman named Sarah Mitchell. Out of curiosity, Marcus looked her up later that day. What he found made him sick. Sarah Mitchell had died 15 years earlier. She disappeared from that exact truck stop during another blizzard. Her body was found 3 months later, 15 miles into the woods. The official cause of death was exposure, but the police report noted something strange. Her footprints in the snow had been followed by another set of tracks that didn't match any known animal or human pattern. they never found out what had followed her into those woods. And according to local legend, every few years, during the worst winter storms, Sarah appears at that truck stop, still running, still escaping from whatever is always right behind her. Marcus requested a transfer to the day shift the very next week. He still works at that truck stop, but he refuses to be there after dark. And he warns every traveler who stops on snowy nights, if you see a woman in a thin dress asking for help, don't let her in. And whatever you do, don't look at what's standing behind her.
Story 3 comes from a truck stop in Nevada, along one of the loneliest stretches of highway in America. A night manager named David experienced something in 2020 that he still can't explain. It was a quiet Tuesday night around 3 a.m. David was doing inventory in the back room when he heard music playing from the store's overhead speakers. This was odd because the music system was set to turn off automatically at midnight to save power. He walked out to the main floor and immediately felt something was wrong. The music playing wasn't from their usual playlist. It was old, crackling, like it was coming from an ancient radio broadcast. A woman was singing in a language David didn't recognize, and the melody was haunting, almost hypnotic. David went to the office to turn off the music system, but when he checked the controls, everything was already off. The speakers were receiving no input, yet the music continued to play, growing louder with each passing moment. Then the singing stopped abruptly, and a man's voice came through the speakers. He was speaking English now, but his accent was strange, outdated, like something from the 1940s. Station KETC, broadcasting from the crossroads. If you're hearing this, you're exactly where you need to be. The crossing happens at 3:30. Be ready. The door only opens once. David's skin prickled with goosebumps. He checked his watch, 3:25 a.m. He tried unplugging the speaker system completely, but the voice continued, now coming from everywhere at once. The speakers, the old arcade machines, even his own phone, which he hadn't even been using. 5 minutes until the crossing. To those who seek passage, gather your offerings. To those who stumbled here by accident, leave now while you still can. The door does not discriminate. David didn't know what to do. The rational part of his brain told him this had to be some kind of radio interference or a prank, but something deeper, something primal was screaming at him to get out. At 3:28, the front door chimed and 3 people walked in. They moved in perfect synchronization, their faces expressionless. They didn't speak to David or acknowledge him in any way. They simply walked to the center of the store and stood in a triangle formation, each facing outward. 2 minutes until the crossing. David wanted to ask them what they were doing, but fear had stolen his voice. He watched as each of the 3 people pulled out identical items from their pockets, old photographs, yellowed with age. 1 minute, the door is opening. The lights in the store began to flicker. David felt the temperature drop so rapidly that his breath became visible. And then, at exactly 3:30 a.m., the entire building shook. It wasn't an earthquake, it was something else, like reality itself was shifting. For just a moment, David swears it was only a moment, the truck stop wasn't a truck stop anymore. He was standing in the same location, but the building was older. The products on the shelves were vintage from decades ago. And instead of the 3 people who had walked in, there were dozens of people standing throughout the store, all holding photographs, all waiting. And then he saw what they were waiting for. In the center of the store, where the 3 people had been standing,
The air itself had torn open, not like a door or a window. It was like reality had been ripped like paper, and through the tear, David could see somewhere else, somewhere dark and vast, with moving shadows and a sound like 1,000 whispers all speaking at once. One by one, the people in the store walked toward the tear and stepped through, disappearing into that darkness. As each person crossed over, their photograph fell to the ground and immediately aged, crumbling to dust. David closed his eyes, certain he was losing his mind. He counted to 10 and opened them again. The store was back to normal. Modern products on the shelves, fluorescent lights are steady and bright. The 3 people were gone. The tear in reality was gone. But on the floor, in the center of the store, there were 3 small piles of dust, each in the exact spot where the 3 people had been standing. David quit that same night. He didn't even wait for his replacement. He left a note, grabbed his things, and drove straight home. He never went back, not even to pick up his final paycheck. 2 weeks later, out of morbid curiosity, he researched the call sign he'd heard, KETC. He found records of a radio station by that name that had operated in Nevada in the 1940s. It had been shut down suddenly in 1947 after its entire staff disappeared during a late-night broadcast. The station's last known transmission had been at exactly 3:30 a.m., and witnesses reported that the broadcast talked about a crossing and a door opening. The station was located in the exact spot where the truck stop now stands. David has never told this story to many people, afraid they'll think he's crazy. But he drives past that stretch of highway sometimes, and he always makes sure never to stop at that truck stop. And if he's ever driving near there around 3 in the morning, he takes a different route entirely. Some doors, he says, should never be opened, and some crossings should never be made. Story 4 comes from Jessica, who worked at a truck stop in rural Tennessee for almost 5 years. She prided herself on knowing all the regular customers, especially the long-haul truckers who stopped like clockwork on their routes. One of her regulars was an older man everyone called Eddie. He drove for a major shipping company and stopped every Tuesday night around 11 p.m., always ordering the same thing: black coffee and a turkey sandwich. Eddie was friendly, polite, and always left a generous tip. This went on for 3 years. Every Tuesday, like clockwork, Eddie would arrive, order his food, chat with Jessica about his route, and then continue on his way. Jessica looked forward to his visits. In the lonely grind of night shift work, regulars like Eddie were a comforting constant. Then, one Tuesday in March 2018, Eddie didn't show up. Jessica was worried. He'd never missed a Tuesday in 3 years. The next week, he wasn't there either. By the 3rd week, Jessica assumed he'd changed routes or maybe retired. 2 months later, on a Tuesday night at 11 p.m., the door chimed, and Jessica looked up from her magazine and smiled. It was Eddie, looking the same, wearing his usual trucker cap and faded jeans. "Eddie, I was so worried about you. Where have you been?" Eddie smiled warmly and approached the counter. "Same as always, Jess. Black coffee and a turkey sandwich." Jessica laughed, relieved. "You had me thinking something happened to you. 2 months without a visit." Eddie looked confused. 2 months? Jess, I was here last Tuesday. Same as always." Jessica felt a chill, but brushed it off. Maybe Eddie was getting forgetful in his old age. She prepared his order, and they chatted just like they always did. Eddie paid, left his usual generous tip, and headed back to his truck. But something nagged at Jessica. After Eddie left, she checked the schedule board where they logged regular customers. She'd made a note the first Tuesday Eddie didn't show up. Eddie absent,
3/6/2018, and she'd been counting. Eddie had definitely missed 9 consecutive Tuesdays. Next Tuesday, Eddie showed up again at 11 p.m. Same routine, same order. But this time, Jessica decided to investigate. After serving him, she watched through the window as he walked to his truck. She wanted to see which company he was driving for, maybe call them to make sure he was okay. But what she saw made her drop the coffee pot she was holding. Eddie walked across the parking lot, got into his truck, and drove away. But the truck, she could see right through it. Not like it was invisible, but like it was translucent, flickering in and out of existence. And when it pulled onto the highway, it didn't drive away normally. It simply faded, like a ghost, until it was completely gone. Jessica's hands were shaking. She immediately called her manager, but she didn't know how to explain what she'd seen. Instead, she asked him about Eddie, whether he knew the driver's full name or company. Her manager was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that made Jessica's blood freeze. "Jessica, are you feeling okay? Eddie passed away almost 3 months ago. Don't you remember? We even sent flowers to his funeral." Jessica insisted she'd just served him, but her manager was adamant. He told her to check the date Eddie died, March 6th, 2018, the exact Tuesday he stopped showing up.
But that was impossible. Jessica had seen him, talked to him, and served him coffee. She checked the security footage from that night. There she was, moving around behind the counter. She was clearly talking to someone, preparing food, pouring coffee, but in the video, there was no one else there. Jessica appeared to be serving an empty counter, talking to thin air. Terrified, Jessica did some research. She found Eddie's obituary. Edward Eddie Morrison, age 67, had died of a heart attack while driving his route on March 6, 2018. His truck had veered off the highway just 15 miles past Jessica's truck stop. He was pronounced dead at the scene. But according to Jessica's records, the credit card receipts that she physically held in her hand, Eddie had been paying for his coffee and sandwich every Tuesday since his death. The receipts were real and the credit card transactions had processed. But when Jessica called the credit card company, they had no record of the transactions. The receipt numbers didn't exist in their system. Jessica requested a transfer to the day shift immediately, but she left one final note in the logbook for future night shift workers. If a man named Eddie comes in on Tuesday nights at 11 p.m., serve him with kindness. He doesn't know he's gone, and there's no reason to tell him. Some souls are just following the only route they know. To this day, night shift workers at that Tennessee truck stop report that on Tuesday nights, the door sometimes chimes at 11 p.m. and they feel a presence near the counter. A few have reported finding money on the counter, exact change for a coffee and turkey sandwich, even though they never saw anyone come in. Eddie is still keeping his route. And some say if you're there on a Tuesday night, you might catch a glimpse of a translucent truck pulling out of the parking lot, its headlights fading into the darkness like stars at dawn.
Our final story is perhaps the most disturbing, shared by a former night shift worker named Chris who worked at a truck stop in Wyoming. This happened in the fall of 2019, and it's the reason that particular truck stop now refuses to schedule anyone to work completely alone after midnight. Chris was closing out the register around 4:30 in the morning, looking forward to the end of his shift at 6 a.m. The night had been completely uneventful, only a handful of customers, all normal, all forgettable. That's when the last customer walked in. He was tall, wearing a long black coat despite it being a mild night. His face was obscured by the hood of his coat, and he moved with an unusual gait, almost gliding across the floor. Something about him immediately set off alarm bells in Chris's mind. The man went to the refrigerated section and stood there for several minutes, not moving, just standing in front of the drinks. Chris watched on the security monitor from the back office, feeling increasingly uneasy. Finally, the man selected a bottle of water and approached the counter. As he got closer, Chris noticed something disturbing. Where the man's face should have been inside the hood, there was only shadow, deep, impenetrable shadow, like he was wearing a mask made of darkness itself. "Just the water?" Chris asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man didn't respond. He placed the water on the counter, and that's when Chris saw his hands. They were wrong. The fingers were too long, the joints bent at unnatural angles, and the skin was pale, not just pale, but completely colorless, like white paper. Chris rang up the water, his heart pounding. $2.35. The man reached into his coat and pulled out exact change. As he placed the coins on the counter, Chris noticed they were ice cold, so cold that condensation immediately formed around them. Then the man spoke, and his voice was wrong too. It sounded like multiple voices speaking at once, slightly out of sync. "Do you know what time it is?" Chris glanced at the clock. 4:37 a.m.? The hour of the wolf, when the veil is thinnest, when things can cross over. Do you believe in crossing over? Chris didn't answer. He just pushed the water bottle toward the man, wanting this transaction to end. But the man didn't take the water. Instead, he leaned forward, and Chris caught a glimpse under the hood. What he saw made him stumble backward. There was a face there, but it wasn't human. It was constantly shifting, like he was looking at a dozen different faces, all occupying the same space, all trying to exist at the same time. "Last chance," the man said. "Do you want to cross over? I can show you what's on the other side. I can show you where everyone goes when they disappear from places like this." Chris's hand fumbled for the phone under the counter. "I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." The man laughed, and the sound was horrible, like breaking glass mixed with whispers. "I've already left. I left a long time ago, but I still come back. I always come back. The road calls to us, doesn't it? The endless road. And at the end of every road is a place like this, a crossroads, a threshold, a place where worlds meet." The lights in the store began to flicker. Chris grabbed the phone and dialed 911, but before he could speak, the man reached out with those impossibly long fingers and touched the counter. Where his hand made contact, frost spread instantly across the surface. "I'll see you again. Everyone works night shift eventually. Everyone crosses over eventually. The question is whether you do it on purpose or by accident." Then the man picked up the water bottle and walked toward the door, but he didn't open it. He walked directly through the glass, as if it wasn't even there. Chris watched on the security monitor as the man crossed the parking lot and simply dissolved into the darkness, fading like he was never there. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Chris showed them the security footage, but there was something wrong with it. The footage showed Chris at the counter, clearly in distress, clearly on the phone, but there was no other person in the store. The water bottle Chris had scanned was there on the counter, but on the footage it appeared by itself.
The transaction went through on the register, $2.35, but there was no customer. The only evidence that anyone had been there was the frost mark on the counter where the man had touched it. The mark was in the perfect shape of a hand with too many fingers, and it wouldn't melt. Even when Chris tried to wipe it away or warm it up, the frost remained. The next day, Chris's manager had to call a contractor to replace that section of the counter. When they removed it, they found that the frost had penetrated 3 inches deep into the solid material, forming crystal patterns that looked disturbingly like screaming faces. Chris quit that day. The truck stop installed a new policy. No one works alone after midnight. There must always be at least 2 people on shift, and they installed additional security cameras, including one pointed at the entrance. Because sometimes, usually around 4:30 in the morning, the cameras pick up something. A tall figure in a black coat standing just outside the entrance, not moving, just watching. He never comes in anymore, now that there are always 2 people working, but he watches and waits. Local truckers have started avoiding that truck stop in the early morning hours. They've spread stories about the man in the black coat, the figure who appears between 4 and 5 a.m. during what he called the Hour of the Wolf. They say he's looking for people who are alone, people who are vulnerable, people who might be willing to cross over to wherever he came from. And according to those who've seen him, his offers are becoming more frequent, more insistent, like whatever exists on the other side is hungry and it's running out of patience.
These are the stories from those who stand watch in the loneliest hours, in the places where highways cut through the darkness like veins through flesh. Night shift workers at America's truck stops see things that daylight burns away, encounter visitors that shouldn't exist, and learn that some roads lead to destinations not marked on any map. Rachel learned that some presences never leave. Marcus discovered that some people are forever running from things they cannot see. David found doors that should never be opened. Jessica serves a customer who doesn't know he's dead. And Chris met something that waits in the hour of the wolf, offering passage to a place from which there is no return. The next time you stop at a truck stop in the dead of night, look at the person behind the counter. See the weariness in their eyes, the way they watch the doors and windows, the way they check the security monitors a little too often. They know things we don't. They've seen things we'll never understand. And if you're ever driving through the night and you feel the urge to stop at a lonely truck stop between the hours of 3 and 5 in the morning, ask yourself, do you really need to stop? Can you make it to the next one? Because in those hours, in those places, the veil between worlds grows thin, and sometimes the people you meet aren't people at all. Thank you for joining me in the darkness tonight. If these stories have left you hungry for more tales from the shadow-soaked corners of our world, subscribe to Mr. Shadow's Stories. Hit that notification bell, because every week I bring you new nightmares, new encounters, new evidence that the world is far stranger and more terrifying than we dare to believe. Until next time, keep your lights on, lock your doors, and remember, the darkness is always watching, and sometimes it sees you watching back. This is Mr. Shadows signing off, but never really leaving.